Welcome to The Human Edge. This week's guest is Sydney Sam, a young Ghanaian entrepreneur now living in London. Sam's business is called Workspace Global, which connects African creative talent to businesses both in Africa and all over the world with creative needs. We began talking about business, but quickly moved on to much more personal stuff. Sydney was really open with me about his own journey, his own failings, how he's worked on them. We also talked about what it is to be a man, what it is to be a man in a relationship, how important friendships are between men. I really, especially if you're a man, really urge you to watch this episode. I loved it. I hope you do too. And if you do, please like, please subscribe, all the usual stuff. It'll be massively helpful. Thank you. So take me back to the beginning, or the beginning of Workspace Global. That was almost a decade ago now.
Yes, almost a decade ago.
When you think back now, almost 10 years, what feelings are you left with?
Oh, man. So it's, firstly, I mean, with what Workspace is today as a tech company, a tech platform that connects entrepreneurs to creative teams, you can see the origin story, which takes us all the way back to my first business in university. That was back in 2011, I would say. It was a business called Moonlight Cafe, which was a stand-up comedy, live music, and spoken word concert that we used to take to different universities back in Ghana. And I mean, obviously, we're very youthful, had no idea what we're doing in terms of business. But I started with my roommate, and we had something there, but we needed external support because the revenue model was not making money. We couldn't make enough money from tickets to pay for the event, so we needed corporate support to be able to do that. We'd never thought about how we packaged ourselves for the corporate audience, right? So it just looked like this very scrappy thing, and not many people would give us the lights of day in terms of a real conversation. We didn't know what putting together a proposal would look like, or a website and things like that, right? So that's really where it started. No one was telling us what to do regarding our brand and the way we showed up. But even if someone did, where did we go to find the people who would be able to work on it, right? And so that's where this was born. And right after that, when the business went down, I also freelanced as a graphic designer because I was very obsessed with what went wrong. And so I started to help other student entrepreneurs about to work on their brands as well. Just different things, work on their flyers and stuff like that. But whilst we would do that, I would talk to them about business. So, hey, have you thought about your pricing? Do what would it take to increase your price or to hire a team? And so I started to recognize also the challenges of the freelance space where, you need to find customers, you need to be able to manage projects, you need to have client relationships. Not everyone is built in that way because not many people are teaching those skills for freelancers. Freelancers just know how to do the thing that they're good at.
Yeah.
So 10 years over, starting from that origin story, building a full-blown creative studio in Ghana, very Africa-focused, going global. It's interesting because as an agency, we have been global, but now we are a tech platform and we realize we're a startup again, interesting enough. So it's a full circle journey right now. Very humbling journey, a journey I'm very proud of, but also there's so much more to it that's just about to come. So yeah, I'm just very excited about turning 10, in a couple of months, and the amount of impact. I mean, I must say, no one can take away how many people we've impacted in the time. Hundreds of jobs, hundreds of businesses that have been supported, have scaled large corporate projects, bringing to different countries in Africa. There's been a lot that we've done. It's been a very rich story. I'm very, very proud.
Good, and I want to get into that story a little bit more. Tell me, first of all, about the pivot from the creative studio model to the tech platform.
Yeah.
What prompted the pivot?
So, I mean, well, I've had a fair sense of chinks during the creative studio model. Number one, it's very, especially since the business was based in Ghana, and so it's very relationship based, right? And there are a lot of cash flow issues that you might face running the agency model, because the bigger you get, the bigger contracts you get.
Yeah.
The bigger contracts you get, people expect you to be able to finance more things, and so you're financing six-figure projects, and it's kind of in the abyss. Like, you're working with either the government or an institution, and they will tell you they would pay at a specific point. You really don't know when you're ever going to get paid, right, regarding that. So that was like the first thing. So just business-wise, the bigger we got, we realized the harder it was to just do regular business. First thing. Second thing, we were getting a lot of pressure to become an advertising agency. We're a creative studio, and all our clients would say, hey, so we would like you to run our advertising, things like that, and we had to keep pushing back. And so what we realized also was that because of the conflicts we were having in terms of our identity, because once you're an agency, you should be able to do everything, we started to have small frictions with some of our customers, et cetera, on that basis. And lastly, existentially, I was like, this is not why we started. We now were so expensive that we were pricing out the little guy, the person that we started out to support, right? Because of the agency model, you work with 6-10 customers who pay you very well. We had a team of about 30 full-time staff. So you can see where this was going. And I was like, if this kept going on that way, firstly, we would lose ourselves. We would not be creating as much impact as we would like. Business, the agency model in itself is, I wouldn't say it's dying, but it works in a very, very, very specific way, and it's not really transforming with the times. And so we then made that pivot to, how do we ensure that we can do all the amazing things we do as an agency at a specific fixed price that anybody can afford. And so that was the conversation that we started to have. It was an equation. I mean, the idea popped into my head, but in terms of actually start to do it, we only started just very recently, right? So we had to keep hacking at that equation. Number one, you had to fix and automate the creative process. Number two, you need to be able to find hundreds of talent who can deliver at a certain quality within a very specific timeline, because we deliver everything within 3 days, and everybody's like, you guys are nuts. We hate working with you, blah, 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 all of that stuff. But we understood that, when someone has a pitch meeting and they need a brand deck or a pitch deck by, within a specific time frame, it's crucial for their business to be able to do that. So that's what kind of led to that transition. And I really wanted the bigger challenge of what would it take to have an agency with 1 million customers? What the hell does that look like? And then lastly, on the flip side, I've also wanted the business to survive me. So I've been obviously planning my exit much from a very long time ago, especially because I'm very much a family man. I'm not always great, but I'm working on it. And, I would like the room and the freedom to be able to navigate that fully and give my wife and my kids my full attention. So building that kind of platform, really allowed my impact to survive my efforts. And that has just been an amazing way to just drive this pivot, and it's been really fun. It's like you're addressing a very artistic issue with a very scientific approach. It's a very nice use of both sides of my brain, and it's been very exciting. Yeah.
And so the business now, it looks like it's a platform which matches African creative talent with business needs.
Yes.
And the businesses, they're in Africa, they're in all over the world.
Around the world, yes. I'll push a little further from the matching process. So what most people would experience, what is out there in the market right now? There's a Fiverr and an Upwork where you go there yourself, you pick who you want to work with, you work with them. There's what you pay is held in escrow, and when you're satisfied, it's giving off to you. But you still manage them. You still have to decide who you're going to work with and what work is good. There's also a lot of DIY softwares like Canva and Wix, right, that are empowering people to be able to design themselves, right? But we recognize that there's a huge market, underserved market of people who still want things done for them, but don't have the capacity to choose who they're going to work with, manage that person, ask them, and wait to be asked the right questions, give feedback and stuff like that. So we're really bringing the agency element of managing everything end to end versus... So we take a lot off the customer. You just subscribe and make your request, and it will be done for you in 3 days. Who gets it done? all of that stuff is handled off. We also handle quality control, et cetera,
Yes.
et cetera. So it's quite exciting to see, and that's basically the model, and people are very excited about it because it really solves a lot of problems.
Yeah, and it makes complete sense to me. If it's possible to fast forward yourself 10 years into the future, what do you want it to look like then?
It's going to be a huge ecosystem I'm thinking we might expand beyond branding services. We might just go into just general services, anything that anybody needs done by another person.
Yeah.
That way people no longer need to hire full-time employees. They can just subscribe to a platform and unsubscribe when they want to and get access to unlimited support regarding that.
Sorry to interrupt you. I was wondering when I was thinking about it earlier, why not, for example, social media services? Why not? So that's clearly in your mind.
Yes, it is. It definitely is. I mean, social media services, architecture, legal services. We want to push it. Quite. Yeah. So it goes back to the name workspace, which is where work gets done, and that's kind of where we're going in the future. But you need to own a niche.
Yes.
Dominate it, do it very well, and then people will trust you to be able to deliver, other things. And the thing is, the workforce is there. There are a lot of people, a lot of remote talent who need a very specific framework to be able to deliver at their best, right? Yeah. But what's currently happening is it's only the people who have good people skills, project management skills. Even if you're a good designer or a writer, if you don't have those skills, you're not really excelling in the market. Yeah. So we want to be able to create that inclusion, for people who don't necessarily have the skills. Train them, yes, but also they can just wake up in the morning, sign on and say, hey, I'm available for work. And then, they just get sent a list of tasks to be able to do. Because we don't match one person to one creative. We match tasks to creatives. So one person can be working on 10 people's work at the same time, and one client can be working with 10 creatives at the same time. Yeah. So that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm curious about the attitudes that you've come. You're smiling already. You've come up against either from African businesses or from businesses outside of Africa in relation to African creative talent. Okay. It feels like I'm kind of winding you up.
Yes, you are. You are. To be honest, that's the biggest challenge of our business. It's the mindset for both, actually. So both African talent, African businesses, global business, because currently we're headquartered in the UK. So this is our way to become a global business, right? And so we're constantly dealing with multiple mindset issues because we are, to be honest, at the cusp of innovation in a sense, right? There are other people who've tried this model, but think about it as Uber and Airbnb when they launched. Most people thought it was ridiculous. They had to really overcome that. So I'll start first with the African perspective. So number one, creatives tend to be very egoistic. They have there's a way that they view themselves, right? And it's not their fault. I mean, if you're very good at your craft or you spend a lot of time doing that, you do expect everyone to revere you that way. But we have tried to remove the creative from the work. So the idea is the work is an outcome that needs to be predictable. And so you need to align yourself with the fact that there would be a certain level of prescription to ensure that a certain quality is met. They hated it in the beginning. Yeah.
I'm imagining that would have put off many creatives from working with you.
Exactly. There's a second bit where we deliver everything in 3 days. And 3 days is what gets to the customer. So internally, every creative delivers in 24 hours because we have to review. We never just submit anything. It has to go through a quality control process before that happens. And even before the creative gets to sign the work, we never send the work from the customer to the creative. We refine that so that it's in creative language, if you get what I mean. So it's a very robust system. They absolutely hated it. It's like, why? It takes me 2 weeks to be inspired and be able to build a brand identity and all of that stuff. So that was a huge paradigm shift that we had to create. Yeah.
So creatives are creatives the world over.
Yes, right. Exactly. It's the same. It's the same. So what we speak to. Which is what we realize that as much as we're creating job opportunities, we are also working on a bit of security and consistency. So that's the emotional element that we're touching on. So most creators are used to project-based work
Yep.
or full-time employment. We have built the perfect middle ground, which is it's not project-based work because we'll give you a number of projects, but you're not attached to a specific project. We will just give you a certain number of projects so that you can redeem your hours or your what we call points for cash at the end of it. So that way, almost like an Uber driver, right? You know, he can estimate whether it's he or she can estimate whether it's 10 customers or 20 customers or 30 customers in a month. And then there's a bit of consistent income on the basis of that. So we were able to tap into that psychology regarding that.
Yeah.
And the fact that they don't never have to deal with a customer, they never have to deal with the research.
Yes.
You know, there's a lot of things. So there were few people who came in and said, oh, this is amazing. And then we've actually grown the creative network through referrals versus open calls. Initially, open calls were how we started out. They come in, it's a misfit.
Yeah.
But then with the people who understood have been able to bring in people, and you know, so that's been interesting. Then there's African businesses. There's a huge mindset shift where there's a deep appreciation for design and branding, right? But with the sheer availability of options out there, it's still not viewed as importantly as accounting or law, legal support, right? So we're still dealing with, number one, the fact that this is valuable for your business. We still have to convince a lot of people to do that, number one. Number two, there's a huge challenge with subscription culture. In Africa, we don't like subscriptions. It's not something that, interesting. Netflix has done a very good job. I'm surprised that Netflix has been able to do that, right? But generally, people are averse to the idea of, a decision I made 6 months ago, just consistently depleting my funds. You know, so the whole subscription model of like Workspace being a software backed by a network of people. Yeah. Also had a bit of friction, with people saying, so you want me to subscribe to this? And I'm like, yes, you can cancel any time. They're like, no, but I need to subscribe to this. And, there's a whole thing. Why don't you charge me 5 times the price so I know what I'm paying?
Okay, yeah.
It's very interesting. Yeah. So that has also been a very interesting, mindset battle. Then there is the global market and its perception of African talent. And a lot of people we've been trying to raise money with VCs and stuff like that. And some people have advised, no, take out the Africa element. And I'm like, no, that's why we're doing it. Yeah. We're creating just the same. India did this. China has had not so much on the international front, but India has really been good at doing remote workforces, right?
Yes, that's right.
So we're trying to, and Africa is on the way to being the largest and youngest workforce in, a couple of years. And so we are seeing that opportunity. We're recognizing that. Number one, it also really helps with alleviating poverty, crime, because once more people are engaged where they are, So that's what we believe in and that's what we're going to stand by. But there is a perception about working with African talent because people just perceive a lot of risk regarding that. Are they going to understand me? Things like that. Just because there's a very different media narrative regarding. It's really changing, I will say. But it still takes a bit of convincing to get, businesses, startups in the US to subscribe. Yeah. So the tech interface helps us.
Yes.
Because we're saying, well, you don't have to meet the people. Just that you're working with them, but you don't have to. We manage all the risk, and just subscribe and you get your stuff. And I think most people are able to get with that. They're like, okay, so it will come in 3 days. Yes. It will be good quality. Yes. There would not be typos. Yes. Okay, I can get ahead with it. So that's kind of how that's been.
That's super interesting. Thanks for giving me the full-blown narrative.
Yeah.
And I suppose from a parallel perspective, I'm thinking about your own narrative, the story you've told yourself about who you are over the years. How's that shifted? There's another deep side, a big story.
That is it's still ongoing. I grew up very headstrong with a very specific identity. Obviously, because from the context that I had to build my identity from very harsh circumstances. When I say harsh circumstances, I don't mean my parents have been great in my family life. I mean, growing up was fine. But I went to high school 3 years before everyone else. So I was 12 when everyone was 15. I didn't have an older sibling to help me navigate that, and I was also a very vocal and boisterous child. And so I recognize that I just generally wasn't liked in many spaces, even though I achieved a lot in many spaces. And so my identity really was rooted in being better than everyone else because that was the only thing I had. I wasn't, I mean, socially now I'm much better, but I think growing up, I think that was a major challenge, you know, because I was younger, just generally, and I talked too much. So then there was the conflict between the entrepreneurship route and the full-time career route, which my parents, obviously, well, my father was, I mean, he invests in your security, right? So, you know, go to an Ivy League school, do this, do that. And I totally boycotted that journey and said, I'm just going to be an entrepreneur right out of university. Also deciding to educate, to stick to my Ghanaian education and not actually go outside. It's much later that I meddled in, did some education in different parts of the world, but fundamentally I am African educated, and that was supposed to be part of my story, an African who built a global business. That was the whole thing. So there was that.
Sorry, just to stop you. Yeah. That was supposed to be the whole story, or still is?
It doesn't matter as much anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't matter as much anymore. I think people are the value they put into the world, and as long as your impact is felt, I don't think it matters, you know, the characteristics around that, you know. So I mean, I still inspire a lot of people to believe that you can come from Africa and do amazing things, but that's not what I wake up in the morning that I'm working towards every day, you know. So
and for me, just to be clear, and the audience too, what you wake up every morning, it's about the business, but it's about what the impact that you're having on African people and the kind of African business landscape
and the world. So to be honest, my main impact point is entrepreneurs all over the world.
All over the world.
So my focus is the idea. I always think about the concept of saving the world, right? And I struggle with it because when I look at it, when I look at all the permutations, it skews to the negative, right? But I was thinking, okay, is there an algorithmic approach you can take to build an army of people that would continuously work at saving the world despite whatever motivation that they go through? And when I looked at it, governments are not really where it's at. Large corporations are not really where it's at. I think entrepreneurs, small, medium-sized entrepreneurs are really the people that if you invest in, they impact the communities. They're well motivated. They're sustainably motivated because they are driven by profit, but also driven by solving a real problem. So that's really my passion point. I believe in empowering the world's entrepreneurs. So on my mentorship and coaching, aside what I do with my business, it's all about empowering entrepreneurs. And on the flip side, also supporting creative talent in Africa. So it's entrepreneurs all over the world, but creating talent in Africa. That's my passion point.
Okay.
Yeah,
that resonates very strongly with me. I think about it in terms of, so I have a tattoo here on my left arm. It's two Hebrew words, tikkun olam, literally means repairing the world.
Yes.
So it's, I think we're coming from a similar place.
Yes, I would say. Yeah. So the question was...
it was about how your...
my identity and my journey. Yes. So you can see there was a lot of rebellion. Firstly, a forced identity created from the circumstances, then a lot of rebellion to fight against the identity that was supposed to be created for me. Then that worked out very well in the beginning because I had nothing else to compare it to, and I was just Sydney the entrepreneur and Sydney the global speaker, and that was just it. And it went well, and then I feel like I wouldn't say it peaked, but I hit a high point when I was recognized on the Forbes list.
Yes.
And as much as so that obviously skyrocketed my potential, but also that really opened me up to the full brunt of who I really was when you have access to lots of money and lots of fame and lots of clout. And it wasn't a very pretty picture all around. I mean, I was still a lot about the impact, but I had a lot of work to do regarding, I realized I really sought out a lot of adulation and you know, there's a lot of people pleasing, but also there's a lot of work that needed to happen internally, and I never saw that until that point. On the flip side,
and how old were you at that point? Because
2019. How old was I? Probably I'm 31 now, so what, 27?
5 years ago.
Yeah, about 5 years ago. Yeah. So 26, 27. Yeah.
And it's really interesting to me, just kind of pausing on that, because most that's pretty young to be doing the work on yourself. I think that's where I'm coming from. So what was it that prompted that introspection?
My wife.
Okay.
So yeah, so she's the anomaly in this whole thing. She just throws a wrench in the works. So we weren't married then. We got married the year after. But I think, and I'm Christian, so I really believe like God had a lot to do with this in terms of picking a person that just generally in the world that I was in at the time would not necessarily have made sense, because she's very calm, very hidden, just a very removed individual from all the flurry of everything. But then she always would ask the hard questions, and she holds you account. She's rooted and stays the course, and so she will not budge regarding certain things. So she asked me the question, "Who are you outside what you do?"
Wow.
Ruined my life.
What a question. Ruined my life.
Ruined my life. I'm not gonna lie. So, I mean, there was a part of it where I didn't even want to address the question, but obviously, I really do. Initially, it was more from the idea of being a great husband. So you can see, so there was a bit of a role I was playing, a performative role, where it's like, I need to be a good husband, so I'm going to work at this. But then in that work, I recognized, no, I need to be a good person to even be able to do any of these things. And that's all she wanted from me. She only wanted me to be a good person for myself. Yeah. And so that was the hard work to undo, who am I outside my fame? Who am I outside the impact I make? Who am I outside my money? Who am I outside the approval of my parents and society? And it's stripped down. And I'm still on that journey. I haven't even fully figured it out.
And what did the work, or does the work look like?
Wow. Firstly, it's a very hard look in the mirror, an objective look in the mirror as to who, try to create some, not just adjectives, but nouns. Okay, so who are you? I am a philanthropist. I am you say you're a father, but those are a lot of hats that you wear. So I had to then go back to am I someone who enjoys art or conversations or stillness or those very, very basic fundamental things. And then also the conversation about integrity is also I'm someone of a lot of integrity, but it's always convenient integrity. There's always a nice end goal to motivate me at the end, right? And I had to really challenge myself on that. Would you do something if it cost you? Would you do the right thing if it cost you everything? And I didn't think I could answer that question at the time. Right now, I can. So those are some of the things that you start to ask yourself at the when you are on that journey, and just generally, I mean, who are you without the approval of anyone? Who are you when people are watching? Do you like yourself?
Yeah.
Do you like yourself?
Yeah, these are amazing questions to ask yourself, and it's just it's really fascinating for me because, as you know, I'm a coach, right? And so these are questions I typically ask. But I think finding the right questions to ask yourself is a real skill.
Yeah,
it's a real skill, so it's where did that come from?
I think. I feel like my brain is best used at when I'm solving both an artistic creative problem and a scientific problem at the same time. And I think the best kind of problem for that is humans. Human psychology. Just the way the mechanics of humanity. And so I just started to invest a lot in. Initially, it started with getting people to like me very quickly. So that kind of became some kind of like an SOP that I was working on, and being able to accelerate that. So can you do that in 3 days? Can you do that in 1 day? Can you do that in 1 hour? And questions are a very big part because people like to share, people like to be listened to versus, So those are some of the things that I noticed very, very quickly and scale that into other things. So it made me a very astute business person. I also run a nonprofit called Open Space, which just basically has its conversations for growth among professionals around the world. And the full premise of that is just asking good questions and letting people talk. And so I've just been able to harness that skill over time. And it's interesting to see how a small amount of input has a rolling effect even after the immediate interaction,
Yes.
to actually create some impact. So I just really enjoy what it does.
Yeah, that's right. One of my former coaches talks about the white space between conversations. That's where a lot of stuff often bubbles up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these, we're talking about kind of your own perceptions of yourself.
Yes.
You're a young entrepreneur, and imagining your age counts for you, but also might have counted against you
Definitely.
in terms of other people's perceptions
Definitely.
of you. Can you talk to that?
So, especially when in Ghana, it hasn't always been cool to be young and successful. It's just very recently become that kind of thing, because you attribute success to a certain level of responsibility.
Yeah.
So you need to be above 40, 45 for your money and your what you've been able to achieve in your life to make sense. At 25, it's almost frowned upon because it feels like a get-rich-quick scheme. You seem a bit irresponsible, things like that. So that's the first thing, in the sense that I realized I felt like I've had to tame. Really, I couldn't bring the full version, the full extent of myself to a lot of situations, because it would be too much and it wouldn't be appreciated in the right way. So that's the first thing.
And this is in Ghana.
In Ghana specifically. I wouldn't say, my international career, because I have worked in senior leadership roles for AI companies, edtech companies around the world, that hasn't really come into play, but they were remote. So I must say that, so that way, I think the only interaction you have is based on value, and people can't really see a lot in relation to who is behind that.
Yeah,
so maybe that might have helped.
That's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was in Ghana. And then also, so there'll also be people who would not want to do business with you because they want to see your boss, or who actually owns the company. So that was also a very interesting case, where I would find that most people would turn down business because you just weren't familiar, because you're this kid who does stuff. And what else? What else would I say? I felt quite lost, because when, in my 20s and my late 20s, I didn't really connect with a lot of people my age. But also I didn't really connect with a lot of people who are older. So you're kind of in this mix of where do you really fit? So I find that I'm now kind of leaning into just being a young person. And it's difficult, because I also feel like I'm moving very slowly. I sometimes feel a little, not reckless, but where I want to go climb a mountain, and that's just what excites me during the day, and I would do that instead of going for a meeting specifically, things like that. But because my wife encourages me to just be a young person, especially so you don't regret it when you're 60 and you feel like you always lived your life on very different terms from what you actually wanted. So that has also been, finding yourself in that space, because I'm not fully content living as a young person, but I'm also doing it intentionally to make sure that I'm fully experiencing these things. And I feel like I'm experiencing these things late. I'm not even gonna lie. So yeah, that's kind of what my age has played. How that's been.
That's super interesting. I'm thinking back to your school when you were
12.
Yeah, 12, and
Everyone's
you were
15.
12 and everyone's 15, and now you're 31.
Yeah.
And is everyone still older than you, but you're trying to be younger than you are?
Yeah, that's actually quite an interesting dynamic. Well, the community I have around me right now is very wholesome. So it's young men, 30s, 29, 33, in a similar space, very ambitious, very driven, family oriented, so that's been helpful. I also think that the dynamic is very different in the UK. I hate to admit it, but we've kind of moved to the UK now, because my wife is British, my son is British, and so I spend more of my time here. And I find that the norm is, the status quo is much higher than I've known, right? So I always say, in the UK, I'm not great. In the UK, I'm not great. I'm a great person in general, but I'm not the 1% of people doing things. And I love that.
Yes.
Because I feel very challenged. So the people that my community right now really speaks to to that. And not to say like I didn't have that in Ghana, but again, they weren't young people doing these things. They were older people who were interacting with a younger person.
Yes.
So that's also been helpful.
Okay. So you're not, do you aspire to be the 1% here?
Not anymore. It's not important.
Yeah.
It's not important. I think I am actually very content with my life at this stage, and I don't say that lightly because I've struggled with being able to come to that point. But I'm very content with my. God forbid, but if I died today, I would be very content with where I am, what I've achieved, what we have, the state of my family. My family likes me. I like my wife. I like my son. I think that's not something a lot of people can say. I feel safe. Well, not just at home, but I don't feel like there's a toxic part of me that it needs to be tamed or checked. So I feel so I don't need much more. I do want to see Workspace be the most it can be.
Yes.
Which is impacting millions of lives. Whether I need to be the person who does it doesn't really matter. I mean, I want to see it achieve the most potential that it can. And then when I exit that, I think I will focus on Open Space, which is a nonprofit, which is working without the motivation for money, the incentive for money, and I always ask myself, how would I do things differently if that was not on the table? So, yeah.
And what's the answer?
I don't know. Yeah. And I think the ambiguity is what I'm working towards. I enjoy the idea that if you take out all the adventure of life, what do you have? So I don't fully know exactly what I want to do when I'm 40. I know it's something with conversations and people, but if that looks completely different from what I imagined it, I'm totally okay with that as well. So yeah.
Before we began recording and filming, we were talking about your relatively new role as a dad. So how has that, very generally, altered your perspective on life?
Fatherhood is tough, but it's not the toughest thing. I think the toughest thing has been, being married to a mother, I would say, which was I shared this in a different podcast. I don't think there are a lot of people who are empowering men with the skills to be good partners to mothers, because your son will take what you give him, right? The accountability is not very high. So just managing that dynamic has involved a lot of dying to myself, because, one, now I'm 100% an entrepreneur. I have no long-term contracts. Literally everything that happens in my life comes from my business. And I'm still an entrepreneur at heart. Even though I have been a CEO for quite a while, I'm back to being an entrepreneur and a founder. So there's still that scrappiness, with that. And I find that my son, or being a father, requires the same amount of creativity, that you need to be an entrepreneur. Yeah. So it competes. It's constantly, rubbing against each other. Because, I try to systemize it. He sleeps at a specific time. I spend an hour or 2 hours with him, so very, very specific. So that way it's predictable. It's not predictable. He could get sick or get a flu and just throw everything. He could wake up at night and, that kind of thing. And, it's also really hard to have your entire schedule determined by another individual. Yeah, that's uncomfortable, very, very uncomfortable, because I have always been someone who's had very good sleep. And once my sleep, I have no control over my sleep, just in general. Yeah. And that is very frustrating as well. But also, it's the joys of seeing someone grow, and you only have a little part of it because he grows on his own terms, and he's been, groomed and raised by God in his own way. And so it's just very humbling to recognize you can only influence this, even though I'm his father. I can only influence his life. I can't even really create it. I can't predict it. He could also just decide entirely to go on a completely alternative route from what I've imagined. And that's also very humbling, to see. It's very humbling.
Yeah, I recognize that. As my son, I've got two kids. Nice. Rosie's 12, right. Noah has just turned 10. And
two Noahs,
that's right. And I've recognized that myself in terms of, as parents, you can't help but want certain things from your children. You want them to take a certain direction.
It just makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. But you have absolutely no control. No control over it at all. There's an element of guiding. There's an element of suggestion,
negotiation.
But ultimately, they are
make the
the
decision.
creators. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. It's odd.
Yeah, and for an entrepreneur, I suppose that's doubly confounding,
Yes,
right?
it is. It really, really is. There's another thing also that I find as well, that your children are also an interesting reflection of you. And so I do not notice what my child, from a genetic perspective, there's certain traits that comes through or come through your kids. And then also the way you behave and the things you don't notice, they pick up.
Yes.
So sometimes you see those reflections and you're like, no, you could not have learned that from me. But you realize that you are actually also, you realize who you are and what you are as a teacher. One thing I would also say is that it's also a bit shocking how little you know about being a parent. You always assume you would because you always have the context of what your parents could have done better, etc., etc. But sometimes I genuinely feel I'm a terrible parent, or a mediocre parent at least, and I can't accept it. But it's what it is, and it's heartbreaking, because I can coach people, I can mentor people, and and just little things like not being on my phone when my son is trying to get my attention, and I'm always about 5 to 10 minutes in, and then realize what I'm doing and go so things like that are things that we need to work through. So yeah, fatherhood is the most. It's not the most humbling thing, but it's been very, very humbling experience. You know, and as he grows up, you will need a completely different set of skills. At every stage, the rule book is rewritten.
That's right. There is no. I mean, the parenting industry. I don't know what it's worth, what its value. It's in the billions, probably. But actually, you can have all the books in the world,
and still,
you still. I've said it often. Being a parent is like having a daily lesson in failure.
Yeah.
You can do 100 things right, but there's always a number of things that you're always doing wrong.
Yeah. But not to discourage anyone out there. I mean, it's great.
It's wonderful.
It's wonderful.
It's wonderful. It is the hardest job in the world and the best job in the world.
I would say.
That cliche is true.
I would say, yeah.
I just want to come back to one thing you said a few minutes ago about men not understanding. I can't quite remember the phrase you used.
Being the husband to a mother.
Being the husband to a mother.
Yeah.
So for all the men out there who are husbands to mums, what do we need to do?
Ooh, that's a hard. I didn't expect us to take this twist on this podcast. I think the first thing to recognize is there isn't going to be a balance. I think we come to the table with a preconception that a balance can be achieved so there's men who are not trying to do this at all. So the balance is, very lopsided. The woman is, is on the low side and he is just living his life. Then there's the men who are trying, and they assume that, because he's trying, it's going to kind of balance it out, right? But technically, it's almost always going to be. It's not even like this, it's like this, right? So you can never really balance it out because there's nothing you can do to match what she is experiencing in terms of, physically your body, the hormones, there's just a lot, and it's the change management regarding, pregnancy and postpartum is just terrible because it's almost in an instant. You have to have adopted a certain level of skills, be a certain kind of person, to just be able to cater to this human. And then you have to cater to two people. So she usually stops catering to you in the time. And we just have to admit it. She stops catering to you for about 6 months,
We are in that period of time, just not a priority.
Yes, you're just not a priority. It's just, and it's okay. Yeah. It's just kind of the way it's wired, right? And so firstly, accept that balance is not possible. You will have to try to, and you're not trying to match it up to her, but just sacrifice as much of yourself as possible. We also tend to gravitate towards escapism. We don't notice it, but it is a very, very stressful time. And I found myself burying myself in work, or, for some people it might be video games. For some people, everyone has a way that they escape. Yeah. And I just want you to notice it, just so that you're not, I do think it's good to take healthy breaks. but don't escape. Don't abandon your family. So sometimes you can be present at home and completely not be there.
Yeah.
You know, so that's the second thing. The third thing is be a friend to someone who is going through the biggest change in their lives. Yeah, and I think that's hard because for some reason we take our wives for granted or our partners for granted during that. They're just supposed to kind of be able to navigate that. But if that was your best friend who you were not married to and that was not your baby, and they were with you every day, there's a very different way.
It's a great perspective.
Yeah. There's a very different way. You'd be very, hey, how's your day going? Like, we don't do that as much. We just kind of deal with manage, right? Versus, properly empathize, with that. So
it can be a little bit, if I can use the word, a bit transactional.
Exactly. You do what you have to do. You do what you have to do. And
I think, having kids who are a little bit older, thinking back to those early days, the most striking thing is the almost complete loss of identity that the mother goes through. For dads too, there's an element of that, 100%.
Yes.
But for mums, it's almost total.
Yeah.
They have to subsume their identity in order to to look after the child, and that is such a big deal.
It's such a big deal. And also, I mean, their bodies don't restore to normal for about a year to 2 years after the birth. So if you think about the idea that you would not be able to fully recognize the way your body operated, just a couple of months ago, it's quite a lot to deal with. But I don't assume that men don't need support.
Men absolutely need support.
They do.
And something that kind of we talk about in this space quite a bit is the inability of many men to have a conversation like this, to talk about how they're doing, how they're feeling, and we all know the statistics about suicide being the biggest killer of men these days. And so, what's your? I don't want to make any assumptions. What's your experience been like in kind of in the communities that you're in terms of men talking to each other?
Well, I think it is something that the way we prioritize wealth as men, the level of foresight that, I mean, there's a group of men who don't, but then there's a lot of men who have a lot of foresight in terms of their wealth, right? I would just say bring those same skills to building your community. And a lot of your community is circumstantial. And we had a conversation about this on Open Space where I feel like as we grow older, your friends are the people you choose, not the people you happen to be friends with. And that's something that and it's okay if your best friend is somebody that you went to school with, and but now that you have, you're building your life in terms of what you need, in terms of who refills you. You need to choose people, and you choose them before you need them. That's what I'm saying in relation to that foresight. Choose someone who will remind you of your principles and value systems 5 years down the line, because they're just an anally rigid individual, and that's just what you like about them. Choose somebody who will ask you the hard questions. Choose somebody who would make you laugh, and so be strategic about that. It's perfectly okay. It's not transactional at all to find people who work for you, and then also find the way you can give them value. I think men also don't give enough. And when I say give, not necessarily in terms of money or just time, but then give of yourself in terms of, the more you give, the better you feel. And so it's actually not even just in receiving. Invest in giving. Take some time out every week to just give something to a friend that you go do a chore with them, call them, stuff like that, and go take care of their kids. Little things that don't seem very normal, and they even wouldn't appreciate it as much because you're guys. Guys are just like, why are you offering to do this? This is weird, but it makes you feel better, and so that's just what I would encourage. That do that before you need it, and so that usually in the seasons when it's most difficult, you find that you can cash in on so much during that time.
And you make conversation a focal point of your life.
Huge,
But there are many men out there that feel like opening up about themselves, being vulnerable is maybe that's the way they were brought up. It's just not the thing to do. So for men like that who might be listening or watching the show, what would What would you advise?
I think it's easier to listen than to talk. Vulnerability comes in feeling. Vulnerability comes out of vulnerable situations, right? And I find that the more because I'm a talker, I can talk for days, right? But as I've grown older, I listen more, and I find that the substance of my conversations are much deeper, even for me, just because I'm quiet and I'm listening more. And then the context with which you share becomes so much more relevant when you're actually listening. So if you are struggling with, you feel like you need to be vulnerable, you don't even know where to start, I would encourage you to genuinely listen to just start there. Just shut up and listen.
Yeah.
And not just hear, because sometimes we're just taking in data to be able to make a decision. No, empathize, genuinely empathize and do the hard work of what that feels like. It's uncomfortable. It's like, and you will find that naturally you will start to find the tools to be able to contribute in a way that then makes you even, you're building the muscle little by little to be more vulnerable because you are allowing another person to be vulnerable. That's what I would say.
That's beautiful. Great advice. Great advice. We've talked about, or we touched on open space a little bit, and I want to give it its full due attention. And you're so passionate about it, and that's one of the reasons.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit more about how it began and what it looks like now.
Okay. So open space was birthed out of workspace. So I think one of our early clients, one of our early conversations was called Clients from Hell. So it started out because a lot of workspace clients struggled with mindset. And because they struggled with mindset, it was bad for business for us because we would find that they would not take objective decisions on their businesses to be able to grow when we gave them advice. And we would try to tell them, but we're just a branding company, just shut up, right? That kind of thing. So we then thought it would be important to create a space to be able to empower them to be able to build their mindsets through conversations. And we recognized also that it's much easier to impact somebody when they're the ones talking and not you. So again, so it wasn't a workshop where we would call and train. No, it was an open conversation where all I did was ask the right questions and then allow conversation to happen. And that's what came up with the whole idea of open space. It's an open space for peer-to-peer dialogue. And I've been very particular not to make the leaders of the conversations high-profile people, because that's usually what the world knows. Panel discussions of high-profile people know. The focus of the conversation is the people who are in the room. And then naturally you start to learn or start to reflect. It takes a little bit more time, but yeah. So that's where it started from. And then it just kind of evolved into, we started with business. Then, a little bit about entrepreneurship. Then we started to do life. We started to do social issues. The topics have been very interesting. We've had a topic, Race to Cheat, which was tackling the issue of how there's an undertone of how African society condones adultery and fornication quite a bit. And what a man's perspective on that, which parts of that was I raised to believe, and then a woman's perspective of condoning it as well. So there's been Race to Cheat. There was, we spoke about Clients from Hell. We spoke about how trauma ruined my love life. We've done ageism. Like we just pick very random topics, but they're not random. The idea is it's always pertinent to something at a time. And then we pick professionals in the city. So we've done it in 4 cities now. I think Accra, Lagos, London, Nairobi. We also want to do this in Cape Town and then in the US. But to be honest, we're evolving into a space, and hopefully if you're out there and you want to support us financially, that's one of our biggest things. We need the funding to be able to work freely. We just want to be able to give away the SOP, the science of being able to have these conversations, so these conversations can just happen naturally, in a way that is just, that's always been the vision. Open space is supposed to be open and just, once you follow a specific set of tools, it can happen. So yeah. It's
like open source software.
Yes, basically, that's what. Exactly, for conversation. Okay. That's what it's going to become.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, I asked you the 10-year question earlier about workspace. So let's finish with the 10-year question on open space.
On open space.
If you had a magic wand, you could create whatever you wanted to create. What would that look like?
Oh, that's hard. That's very hard.
Don't tell me you've never thought about it.
I have thought about it. There's a part of it that's selfish, because I would love for there to be thousands of these satellites around the world. And the beautiful thing is, so geographically, I want that global expansion. From a media perspective, medium of how conversations happen, most of them are in person, but conversations don't have to be in person. So
They are richer.
they are richer in person, yes. But I mean, so we also have this tough issue where we try not to record conversations so people can feel very vulnerable. But there's so many people out there who need to hear these conversations.
Yes.
So we do need to also have that virtual, podcast element to that. So there's that level as well. And then we want to drive. So the conversations are having transformation in people, but we would also like to have some external impact. If we can. Especially, so actually the part that I'll probably drive the most is open space for business. So we've been trying to help companies have difficult conversations. Yes. So that's where we think there's a lot of juice. We want to do that, and then also for government and policy. So we want to literally just take the same model to see if we can, broker more peace negotiations, to broker more, there's a lot of areas with which that works. So there's conversations that are having real large-scale impacts, but also micro-scale impact as well.
Yeah, no, I love that. And the conversation, especially in the public forum, is like a lost art.
Yes, it is.
People are shouting at each other.
Yes, it is. And people are not listening.
People are not listening to each other.
Yeah.
No, and that is the cause of so much strife in the world. And, you're with a mission to save the world, conversation.
Repair the world.
Thank you. Yeah,
yes,
thank you.
Yes,
well,
yes.
Either will do. Getting people of different stripes in the same room, having a conversation together, has to be the way forward.
It's definitely, and teach people how to disagree. And it's such because kids are very good at disagreeing and being friends later. Yes. I think we just need to remember that, it's part of life, and we will facilitate asking the right questions, and we will create the spaces for people to be able to have healthy disagreements, agreements, see themselves in others, see how different they are from others, broaden perspectives, empower people. Goes on and on.
Okay. Yeah. I love the idea. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
So listen, we began a conversation in March, maybe 6 months later. We're finally sitting down together. I'm so glad.
Really happy.
I've loved it.
This has been very, very good.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, I appreciate it.